Part 23. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 222. Chapter 221 Wedding, Part 2. Benjian City. After the night fell, the banquet hall of the Red Fort gradually became lively. The newly married viscounts will invite the guests who come to watch the gift here. There are more than 600 square meters of luxury halls on the red tongue floor. The two long tables of oak are placed on both sides of the hall, full of various wines and wines. The well-dressed servant stays at the long table like a sculpture, ready to serve guests at any time. However, few people come here to eat. Even if you use it, you can taste it. It is a rude behavior to eat the sea and drink on such occasions. The guests in the hall are divided into two dials. The beautiful and moving ladies are concentrated in the rest area on the left, making silver bell-like laughter from time to time. A young girl who looked only 15 years old became the target of the ladies, because she received the flowers thrown by Vila during the day. This shows that she was blessed by the bride and was about to become a lucky one for the next marriage. The little girl's blush was like a familiar apple, and she didn't know if she was shy or excited. The gentlemen of the clothes were concentrated on the right side of the hall. They gathered together in 3 or 2, holding a cup of champagne in their hands, talked kindly, and did not know how many consensus and tacit understanding they had reached, or how many intrigue conspiracy was weaving. Among these male nobles, there is an obvious core Duke of St. Hilda. He just stood there quietly, and Zyaka tasted the champagne in the cup. Although he didn't say anything, the aristocrats around him took a turn and greet them one by one. I was drunk, and I was so excited that my face was flushed. However, the Duke of St. Hilda is noble, and the nobles dare not disturb too much. As a result, the Bachelor of Deo has become the object of everyone's rush to talk. The topic of discussion is naturally inseparable from the current chaos in the north. Those who can come to this wedding are definitely the Feng Chen ministers who are loyal to the Duke of St. Hilda. The Dawson family attacked, as if he couldn't wait to immediately lend the army to the battlefield, and the hands of the northern borders. Daen's bachelor's scholarly cope with the lords of the throne, and he was a little disdainful. After the large cleaning last year, the strength of the North Lord was basically cleaned. At this time, these nobles in front of them were basically new lords who had just been separated for a long time. Duke of Da, even the Bachelor of Taoism could not look at it. What really values the Duke is the army of the Angle family. Only the young man who inherited the church in Garcia can let the Duke of St. Hilda come to Benjian City in person at such a critical moment, and take the daughter-in-law. Mary. Of course, although the Bachelor of Taoism is disdainful of the nobles who came up, the superficial posture still has to do. While dealing with these lords and nobles, he was secretly observing the Duke of St. Hilda. Then, the Bachelor of Daen was keenly discovered that the Duke of Tonight seemed to be absent-minded. As the atmosphere of the banquet gradually became enthusiastic, Colin and Villa, who changed their clothes, finally appeared. Colin replaced a red and black voice dresses, with a gorgeous rose in his chest, elegant and handsome. Vera also replaced the wedding dress with inconvenient movements, put on the slim white low-cut back long skirt, and the golden show became a lady. Gellishness, gentle manner, pure and gorgeous beauty, youth and mature beauty, combined with her unique charm. The applause sounded, and the new couple entered the hall. A huge wedding cake was pushed out by Kathy. The butler Iman sent the silver dining knife to the hands of Colin to signal him to cut the cake with Villa and let everyone eat. Colin smiled and handed the knife to Vera, then held her hand, and cut a small piece on the huge 8-layer cake. Boom! A bottle of champagne was opened, and the bubble sprayed suddenly spilled over the head of the newcomer. Colin quickly held Vera in her arms and prevented her from being spilled by the drink. After playing for a while, Colin handed the cut cake to the Duke of St. Hilda, and then handed the knife to Vera to signal her to continue to divide the cake for the guests. He himself walked through the crowd with the Duke of St. Hilda and came to a secluded corner. "I'm afraid there is no time to give you a honeymoon." Duke St. Hilda opened the door to see the mountain. Colin nodded and had expected it for this. The Duke came to Benjian in person and married Vera to him. If he had nothing to ask, it would be strange. "I need you to mobilize the army at the fastest speed and send troops to the Iron Furnace city. If you can capture the city within a month, I will immediately register you as the Count." Colin blinked, thinking about his tone. "Master Duke, of course, I am willing to kill the enemy bravely for you, but I think it is better to attack the Eagle City first." "Oh, why?" The Duke of St. Hilda tasted the newlywed cake, and he couldn't see his anger on his face. "First of all, the falling city is closer to Benjian city. Moreover, the strength of the Count Iman is weaker than the Marquis of Daosin. What's more, the connection between the Saint Simon family and the Iman family is obviously closer. We will bring the old nest of Earl Iman, which can greatly weaken the power of the Saint Simon family." Colin said his reason, but did not tell the most important reason. "There is a card in the incident that he has Vala in the Eagle City. Do you think the Iman family is now the most reliable forces of the San Sima family?" A mockery smile appeared on the face of Duke St. Hilda. "Is not it?" The Duke of St. Hilda did not answer positively, but said unpredictable, "Don't worry about the Iman family, it is just a wall grass that just wants to please two ends. Moreover, I have a way to provoke them and the Saint Simon family relationship." Khalil's eyes turned, and it seemed to understand what. "Moreover, the dwarf is our real confidant." The Duke of St. Hilda finished the cake, wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin, and then ordered it in an unquestionable tone, 3 days later, I hope to see your army from Benjian city departs and marches into Taihu city." After speaking, he did not wait for Colin's statement, he reached out and patted on his shoulder, and then left. The strength of the Duke made Colin uncomfortable, but there was no way. He did not dare to resist each other in person. With his chin alone, Colin suddenly felt that if he couldn't resist positive resistance, could Walla do something about the fall of the Eagle City, thereby guiding the Duke to change his mind? During the thoughts, Khalil decisively switched to the perspective of the blood slave arranged in the felling Eagle City. But then he was startled by the scene in front of him. "What's the situation? Is this the fire?" Colin instructed blood slaves to climb up the nearby roof, and looked at it with all his eyes. The raging fire dragons made the whole falling Eagle City as if it became a flame purgatory. He was dumbfounded. "I haven't seen this in a few days. Why did it become this look? Of course, I can't find any useful information from the blood slave's mind. I want to know what happened. I am afraid I have to ask the blood of the blood." However, blood descent is self-conscious and cannot be controlled by Collins like blood slaves. "You must find Vala. Just in this situation, where will Walla?" Colin looked at it and found that there was no light in the center of the fall of the Eagle City. Moreover, a cyan-colored light fell from the sky, covering the castle of the Iman family. "Colin, eat cake." Villa quietly appeared beside Colin and asked with a smile. "Okay." Khalil quickly returned to God and took the dinner plate from Villa with a smile. At the same time, the blood slaves who were ordered to fall into the Mulman family in the Macon family immediately. He had to figure out what happened there. I was used to finish the drafts yesterday. Today, there is just a business trip outside, so there is only one chapter, and one chapter is owed first, and I will make up for it later. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 223. Chapter 222. Although it is still late at night, the sky falling in the Eagle City is as bright as day. The burning flames of the bear swallowed everything in the city, and even the weeds within hundreds of meters outside the city were scorched by this horrible burning. Boom! The closed city gate suddenly opened, and a group of cavalry rushed out of the city, but before they escaped from the sea of fire, the flames that suddenly rushed to swallow them with their horses. The cavalry, who had not breathed, struggled in the sea of fire, making a scream of harsh, and it was creepy. After a moment, the scorching fragrance of barbecue drifting in the air. Boom! A section of the city wall finally collapsed under the burning of fire, but until the scattered hot smoke gradually subsided, and no one was rushed out of the city. The entire Falling Eagle city has become a burning furnace of the burning, but it is not steel, but living people. I did not know when it had been completely cut off since the end of the endless sorrow, and countless lives that were burned into coke in this melting furnace seemed to be condensed into a green smoke in the air. Driven by this strand of green smoke, driven by a certain unknown force, it is constantly gathered towards the center of Falling in the center of the felling. There, a cyan light column that dropped from the sky seemed to be a huge transparent cover, protecting the castle of the Uman family in it. Only here, there is the breath of living people. Walla opened his mouth and tried to inhale a sip of the air, but the burning in his chest did not get a trace of relief, but it seemed to be burning even more. Although the cyan mask is isolated from the fire, it can't violate the suffocating burning air, and the horror high temperature that seems to be steamed in life. Every time, Walla could hear his feet from making a noise, and the strong burning pain made his consciousness a little unobstructed. In fact, if Walla was not transformed into a blood, he had extremely terrifying self-healing ability. I am afraid it would have been farted. Although this terrifying self-healing ability can now only bring more torment to Vala, he has not given up and still walks towards the castle in a firm step. At the top of the castle, the figure wearing a mage robe held a staff with one hand, holding his eyes with one hand, and motioning the elf spell in his mouth. The rich green smoke shrouded in his body and was set up on his head to become a huge green cocoon. The surface of the blue cocoon was trembling with Mr. Sun's spell, as if there were something horrible, and it was about to break out of the shell. Nourishment. Walla stretched his hand on the wall of the castle, and the hot temperature instantly scorched his palm blackened, but he seemed to have nothing to do, still climbing up and climbing up. At this time, there is only one thought in his mind. Revenge. He wants to revenge for more than 30,000 innocent death. Driven by hatred, Vala seemed to forget the pain, forgot to fear, and just wanted to unscrew the head of the evil mage on the spire of the castle. But the more closer to the figure of being shrouded in the green smoke, Walla more and more terrifying oppression. Mr. Tao's not tall figure seemed to have become some kind of ancient giant beast, Peyrambutless under the pressure. Walla felt that he seemed to be ants who tried to challenge the gods. However, the ants did not stop. It's closer. Mr. seemed to have nothing to do with Vala's approaching, and still concentrated on the spell. Walla didn't understand the elf text, but felt that the strange syllables seemed to be drilling in his heart as if poisonous snakes were drilled in his heart, and he kept trying to evoke the fear of his heart. Alas! Walla pulled out the night sword, and the sword body became red under the burning of the fire. At the moment he was about to launch the final charge, the light of the corner of his eyes suddenly found that there was still a figure climbing on the other side of the roof. The man was shrouded in the armor, but Vala felt that the other person had an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if it was his own kind. At the moment when the two knights were stunned, Mr. Yan's spell seemed to be the last moment. I saw him raising his left hand suddenly, crushing the weird eyes, and drinking in his mouth. Duke St. Hilda, welcome your trial. Boom. A purple lightning dropped from the sky, and it seemed to tear the sky. Lightning hit the cocoon above Mr. Yan's head, and suddenly a dazzling light broke out. Walla only felt that the vision was completely white, and then nothing could be seen. But he was not surprised and immediately realized that this was an excellent opportunity for revenge. Although nothing can be seen, Vala rushed out according to the position of memory. Colin, who controlled the slave, also found that he could see nothing at this time, but he still heard Vala's voice, and quickly controlled the blood slave's body to rush out. Waiting for the dazzling strong light to gradually dissipate, Colin's eyes finally had a blurred image. Ah! Vala's screaming came from his ears. Colin condensed and saw that Vala was covering his half-face and rolling on the roof. The Mr. Yan was also very miserable. The whole right arm was broken, and the splattered blood fell on the roof, which actually corroded the heavy litter out of the green smoke. Colin immediately guessed that it should just be Vala cut off the right arm of Mr., but was burned by the blood splattered. At this time, the green cocoir above Mr. Yan has transformed into a huge eye that is tightly closed. Although it has not opened, Colin always has a feeling. When it opens, it will happen extremely horrible things. Essence. Colin quickly controlled the blood slave to cut his sword and chop to Mr. Yan's neck. At this time, Mr. Yan's right arm was broken, and his left arm was raised above his head. It seemed to support the giant eye. It seemed that his spells have not been completely completed. In the face of the long sword that came again a touch of despair. However, Chang Jian stopped at the last moment. Because Colin suddenly remembered the words that Mr. G used the general language before. Duke of St. Hilda? Trial. So he hesitated. Boom. Another electric light flashed, and the vision of Colin became white again. At that moment, he seemed to lose contact with the blood slave. Wait until the situation of the Eagle City re-see, Colin discovered that the blue giant eyes on the top of Mr. Yan had disappeared and didn't know where to go. Ha 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 ha. Mr. Yan looked up at the sky, and finally laughed madly. Then he turned his head to look at the blood-controlled slaves controlled by Colin, and a doubt flashed in his eyes, but the spell in his mouth did not stop. Boom. Colin only felt a flash of fire in front of him, and then the darkness completely shrouded him. Colin, what's wrong with you? After returning to God, I saw that Vera looked at herself with anxiety. I'm okay. Colin patted his wife's hand with a smile, and then tried to contact the blood slave who fell to the Eagle City, but found that there was no response. It seemed to be killed by Mr. Yan. However, he did not regret it, but immediately looked for the Duke of St. Hilda in the banquet hall. At the same time, the Duke of St. Hilda also looked at Colin and laughed. It's not too early, should it be the end of the banquet, so that the two newcomers can spend a good night together. The crowd in the hall smiled for a while, nodded. Colin also laughed. Master Duke, please let you announce it. Okay. The Duke of St. Hilda nodded in the way. Thank you for your guests. Suddenly, the sound in the banquet hall disappeared. Everyone saw the Duke of St. Hilda's mouth, and one by one, but no sound was heard in their ears. As if he had been dragged into another time and space by some mysterious power, leaving only an illusory projection in place. Colin shocked in his heart, and immediately clenched Vera's little hand. Then he noticed the eyes above his head. It was a gaze that seemed to come from a higher level of life, with shuddering horror power. Colin looked up unconsciously. Although it was obstructive across the layer, he could still see the familiar huge blue eyes, and he was hanging over the red castle at this time. The next moment, Ching opened. Colin's field of vision is once again white, and nothing can be seen. At this moment, his vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch all disappeared, as if he was also exiled into a pale space, completely disconnected with the world. As if only for a moment, it seemed to have passed thousands of years, and Colin finally felt the temperature from Vera's neck again, and the familiar fragrance was smelled in his nose. He took a deep breath, and then looked at the position of the Duke of St. Hilda. Colin, what happened just now? Wei La hugged Colin's arm tightly, panicked. Colin did not reply, but raised his fingers to point the direction of the Duke of St. Hilda. Vera turned his head in doubt, and then saw a creepy scene. Under the light from the sky, the whole person of the Duke of St. Hilda seemed to be fixed at that moment, and then raised his head straight up. Boom! The blue light spread, and the former northern border was like a stone sculpture, breaking the ground. There are no blood flowing, without splattered meat bones, only gravel on the ground. Ah! The sharp scream immediately rang the banquet hall. This chapter is finished. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 224. Chapter 222. Although it is still late at night, the sky falling in the Eagle City is as bright as day. The burning flames of the bear swallowed everything in the city, and even the weeds within hundreds of meters outside the city were scorched by this horrible burning. Boom! The closed city gate suddenly opened, and a group of cavalry rushed out of the city, but before they escaped from the sea of fire, the flames that suddenly rushed to swallowed them with their horses. The cavalry, who had not breathed, struggled in the sea of fire, making a scream of harsh, and it was creepy. After a moment, the scorching fragrance of barbecue drifting in the air. Boom! A section of the city wall finally collapsed under the burning of fire, but until the scattered hot smoke gradually subsided, and no one was rushed out of the city. The entire falling Eagle City has become a burning furnace of the burning, but it is not steel, but living people. I did not know when it had been completely cut off since the end of the endless sorrow, and countless lives that were burned into coke in this melting furnace seemed to be condensed into a green smoke in the air. Driven by this strand of green smoke, driven by a certain unknown force, it is constantly gathered towards the center of falling in the center of the felling. There, a cyan light column that dropped from the sky seemed to be a huge transparent cover, protecting the castle of the Uman family in it. Only here, there is the breath of living people. Walla opened his mouth and tried to inhale a sip of the air, but the burning in his chest did not get a trace of relief, but it seemed to be burning even more. Although the cyan mask is isolated from the fire, it can't violate the suffocating burning air, and the horror high temperature that seems to be steamed in life. Every time, Walla could hear his feet from making a noise, and the strong burning pain made his consciousness a little unobstructed. In fact, if Walla was not transformed into a blood, he had extremely terrifying self-healing ability. I am afraid it would have been farted. Although this terrifying self-healing ability can now only bring more torment to Vala, he has not given up and still walks towards the castle in a firm step. At the top of the castle, the figure wearing a mage robe held a staff with one hand, holding his eyes with one hand, and motioning the elf spell in his mouth. The rich green smoke shrouded in his body and was set up on his head to become a huge green cocoon. The surface of the blue cocoon was trembling with Mr. Sun's spell, as if there were something horrible, and it was about to break out of the shell. Nourishment. Walla stretched his hand on the wall of the castle, and the hot temperature instantly scorched his palm blackened, but he seemed to have nothing to do, still climbing up and climbing up. At this time, there is only one thought in his mind. Revenge. He wants to revenge for more than 30,000 innocent death. Driven by hatred, Vala seemed to forget the pain, forgot to fear, and just wanted to unscrew the head of the evil mage on the spire of the castle. But the more closer to the figure of being shrouded in the green smoke, Walla more and more terrifying oppression. Mr. Tao's not tall figure seemed to have become some kind of ancient giant beast, peyrambutless under the pressure. Walla felt that he seemed to be ants who tried to challenge the gods. However, the ants did not stop. It's closer. Mr. seemed to have nothing to do with Vala's approaching, and still concentrated on the spell. Walla didn't understand the elf text, but felt that the strange syllables seemed to be drilling in his heart as if poisonous snakes were drilled in his heart, and he kept trying to evoke the fear of his heart. Alas! Walla pulled out the night sword, and the sword body became red under the burning of the fire. At the moment he was about to launch the final charge, the light of the corner of his eye suddenly found that there was still a figure climbing on the other side of the roof. The man was shrouded in the armor, but Vala felt that the other person had an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if it was his own kind. At the moment when the two knights were stunned, Mr. Yan's spell seemed to be the last moment. I saw him raising his left hand suddenly, crushing the weird eyes, and drinking in his mouth. Duke St. Hilda, welcome your trial. Boom. A purple lightning dropped from the sky, and it seemed to tear the sky. Lightning hit the cocoon above Mr. Yan's head, and suddenly a dazzling light broke out. Walla only felt that the vision was completely white, and then nothing could be seen. But he was not surprised and immediately realized that this was an excellent opportunity for revenge. Although nothing can be seen, Vala rushed out according to the position of memory. Colin, who controlled the slave, also found that he could see nothing at this time, but he still heard Vala's voice, and quickly controlled the blood slave's body to rush out. Waiting for the dazzling strong light to gradually dissipate, Colin's eyes finally had a blurred image. Ah! Vala's screaming came from his ears. Colin condensed and saw that Vala was covering his half-face and rolling on the roof. The Mr. Yan was also very miserable. The whole right arm was broken, and the splattered blood fell on the roof, which actually corroded the heavy litter out of the green smoke. Colin immediately guessed that it should just be Walla cut off the right arm of Mr., but was burned by the blood splattered. At this time, the green cocoir above Mr. Yan has transformed into a huge eye that is tightly closed. Although it has not opened, Colin always has a feeling. When it opens, it will happen extremely horrible things. Essence. Colin quickly controlled the blood slave to cut his sword and chop to Mr. Yan's neck. At this time, Mr. Yan's right arm was broken, and his left arm was raised above his head. It seemed to support the giant eye. It seemed that his spells have not been completely completed. In the face of the long sword that came again a touch of despair. However, Chang Jian stopped at the last moment. Because Colin suddenly remembered the words that Mr. G used the general language before. Duke of St. Hilda? Trial? So he hesitated. However, it was the hesitation of this moment, and it became steady. Boom. Another electric light flashed, and the vision of Colin became white again. At that moment, he seemed to lose contact with the blood slave. Wait until the situation of the Eagle City re-see, Colin discovered that the blue giant eyes on the top of Mr. Yan had disappeared and didn't know where to go. Ha 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 ha. Mr. Yan looked up at the sky, and finally laughed madly. Then he turned his head to look at the blood-controlled slaves controlled by Colin, and a doubt flashed in his eyes, but the spell in his mouth did not stop. Boom. Colin only felt a flash of fire in front of him, and then the darkness completely shrouded him. Colin, what's wrong with you? After returning to God, I saw that Vera looked at herself with anxiety. I'm okay. Colin's face was pale, but he patted his wife's hand to show comfort. But when he tried to contact the blood slave who fell into the hawk, he found that he had lost contact. It seemed to be killed by Mr. Yan. Colin thought of the strange picture of the felling in the Eagle City, and an unknown premonition was raised in his heart, so he immediately pulled Vera's hand and quietly walked outside the hall. But at this moment, the Duke of St. Hilda also saw Colin and Vera, thinking that the young couple could not wait, so they laughed. It's not too early, should it be the end of the banquet, so that the two newcomers should spend together Liang Xiao. The crowd in the hall smiled for a while, nodded. Colin helplessly turned back and said, Master Duke, please come to announce the end of the banquet. Okay. The Duke of St. Hilda nodded in the way, thank you for your guests. Suddenly, the sound in the banquet hall disappeared. Everyone saw the Duke of St. Hilda's mouth and one by one, but no sound was heard in their ears. As if he had been dragged into another time and space by some mysterious power, leaving only an illusory projection in place. Colin shocked in his heart, and immediately clenched Vera's little hand. Then he noticed the eyes above his head. It was a gaze that seemed to come from a higher level of life, with shuddering horror power. Colin looked up unconsciously. Although it was obstructive across the layer, he could still see the familiar huge blue eyes, and he was hanging over the red castle at this time. The next moment, Qing opened. Colin's field of vision is once again white, and nothing can be seen. At this moment, his vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch all disappeared, as if he was also exiled into a pale space and space, completely disconnected with the world. As if only for a moment, it seemed to have passed thousands of years, and Colin finally felt the temperature from Vera's next again, and the familiar fragrance was smelled in his nose. He took a deep breath, and then looked at the position of the Duke of St. Hilda. Colin, what happened just now? Wayla hugged Colin's arm tightly, panicked. Colin did not reply, but raised his fingers to point the direction of the Duke of St. Hilda. Vera turned his head in doubt, and then saw a creepy scene. Under the light from the sky, the whole person of the Duke of St. Hilda seemed to be fixed at that moment, and then raised his head straight up. Boom! The blue light spread, and the former northern border was like a stone sculpture, breaking the ground. There are no blood flowing, without splattered meat bones, only gravel on the ground. Ah! The sharp scream immediately rang the banquet hall. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 225. Chapter 223. The sky in the east gradually showed a trace of fish belly, and the new day began again. But for the residents of the Felling in the Eagle City, the flames of purgatory last night were the last day in their lives. Minghuo has gradually extinguished, but the suffocating burning has not been dispersed. Even if it is far away, it still feels cool and unbearable. In a bush 3 kilometers away from the Eagle City, a unique carriage was parked. The driver was holding a cricket. It seemed that he didn't sleep well last night. He had thick dark circles on his face, and the fear of lingering between the eyebrows, as if he was making any nightmares. The 2 old horses of the car were eaten on the ground leisurely, and from time to time, the tail was shaken, driving the mosquito fly. There were 2 knocks in the car and woke up the driver. He quickly wiped the saliva in the corner of his mouth and asked respectfully, "Master, are you leaving?" "Well," to the east a majestic voice came from the car, brief and powerful. "Yes, master," the driver immediately waved the whip, urging the old horse to go east. But before going far, the voice came from the car again, "Stop." The driver was unknown, but he stopped the carriage. When he scratched his head and asked what was going on, he found that he didn't know when he was wearing a silver mage robe. His face was shrouded under the wide hat pocket, and he couldn't see the appearance, but the terrorist atmosphere exuded had shivered the driver unconsciously. At this moment, the man's voice came again in the car, "Mark, you go a little farther." The driver was Amnesty, and he quickly ran out of the far away. Subsequently, the curtain opened, and a middle-aged man wearing a white mage robe walked out of the carriage. "Kujas, I didn't expect this taboo technique to be restored by you," Master Yin Robe said, with both amazing and fearful in his tone, but more, it was a strong concern. "Master won it, I didn't expect to start a shock." The white robe mage Cookies, who came out of the carriage, bowed slightly and gave a gift. Later, he shook his head and said, "However, we did not restore the taboo technique. It can only be regarded as a poor imitation, but fortunately, it should be successful." Onist sighed, seeing something with emotion, but then his tone became cold. "You know, if this taboo technique is successful, what does it mean?" Kurosi laughed, his face was full of pride, and inspiring. "It means that our mage no longer has to be careful about the imperial nobles, no longer have to hide in Jevil's panting, let alone the price of life to obtain the power of confrontation with the sanctuary." Listening to Kusu's words, Onist raised his head, revealing an old face full of wind and frost. But this face did not have the slightest joy, but instead show infinite grief and compassion. No. Onist slowly shook his head and poured a pot of cold water for Kus. "If this taboo technique is really successful, it will only give you and bring the disaster to Jevili." Listening to the alarming words of the old mage, Kurosi laughed softly, Master One-It, although I respect you very much, but I still have to say a word that your weakness also surprised me. Facing the ridicule of Kuros, One-It smiled, and seemed to be angry, but said blandly but firmly said. Sorry, Cuckoos, I have always appreciated the spirit of you and Mr. Yan very much, but I can't tolerate your sacrifice of the lives of innocent people to complete the ban, and you can't allow your reckless behavior to destroy Jevely. Cuckoos also sneered, and said, how could there be no sacrifice on the road of exploring the truth? Rather than sacrificing precious mages, it was better to sacrifice those ignorant people. As for Jevely, Lord One-It, your cowardice is the real reason why it gradually declines or even diverse. Now, Mr. Tan and the Emperor Reinhardt have reached a consensus. In the north, he will change to a new owner, and he is also a new owner of a mage. As for the paladin, who has always had a headache for the mage, now there is already a method of response. Therefore, it is time for Master Osnet to ask you to put aside the corrupted dogma and let the mage parliament be born again. Rebelling in the fire, I think you will only play the fire and self-immolation, One-It's complexion. Your goal this time should be the Duke of St. Hilda. Whether he died under this mantra, he will be glory in glory. The Empire triggered a great uproar. And Jevely, as you expected, can survive in such a huge wave. No, I have to talk to Mr. Yan himself. Speaking, One-It walked towards the felling city. But without a few steps, Kuros stopped his way. One-It narrowed his eyes and said in a sink, Kuros, do you dare to stop me? Kuros shook his head firmly, sorry, Master One-It, I promised Mr. Tao to guard him for a day. Within this day, no one must be close to the ruins of the Fall of the Hawk. One-It suddenly laughed, and his tone was so cold, Kuros, do you really think I am old? Kuros raised his staff and responded, no, I just think that you should give up. Ha ha ha, One-It laughed, as if hearing the most ridiculous jokes in the world. Give the throne, just by you also want the mages parliament. Okay, let me see, then you can see, you are so like this, you are so like this, you are so this, you are so like 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 this. What have been grown in the future? During the talk, One-It's eyes became silver and white in an instant. Numerous small electric lights moved around him like a silver snake. His expression became indifferent, and he thought of obscure elves in his mouth. The opposite Kuros also entered the state of battle almost at the same time. I saw that his blonde hair became full of white hair instantly, and even the cream of creams continued to appear on it. The ice crystal visible to the naked eye has also begun to condense in the air. The sky suddenly gloomy, and the wind on the wild seemed to stop. At this time, Kuros and One-It have become two clear worlds. On the one hand, it is extremely cold and frozen, and on the other hand, it is a silver snake dancing lightning. On the one hand, it is the dead silence of winter, as if to freeze all vitality. On the other hand is endless mania, as if to destroy the world. Kujas, the last chance, let, or not, don't let. Master One-It, the world has changed, you are out of date. Ready. With a drink, countless pythons like electric snake twisted the body and bombed Kuros at a speed that was difficult to discern with the naked eye. Ding ding ding. The layers of crystal clear ice shields instantly crushed and turned into small chips in the air, reflecting the colorful light under the reflection of the sun. There is a kind of demon. These beautiful and dangerous ice crystals are condensed in the air without scattering. As Kuros' gestures continue to change their position, they gradually form a mysterious law formation in the air. Roar! The dead ice-like world suddenly ranged, and a cold storm rushed towards One-It with a tornado. Passing along the way, large ice marks were blown out of the ground, and all the animals and plants on the ice marks were frozen in this freezing at this moment. Boom! The huge shock wave quickly spread around with ice and lightning. Although the driver mark had already hid far away, he was still affected by Yubo, and he shook his body and fainted. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 226. Chapter 224. The setting sun was inclined, and the Uman family army began to camp. A bunch of bonfires ignited, dispersing the darkness that gradually shrouded the earth. After the night fell, a fleet labeled with the Tulip Chamber of Commerce slowly entered the barracks. Penny lifted the driving curtain and asked a knight who came up, "What about the Earl?" The cavaliers bowed slightly and replied, "Ms. Penny, please follow me." Penny immediately got off the carriage and led the cavaliers to a tent in the center of the camp. "Why are you here?" Earl looked at Penny, who came in, slightly wrong. Penny smiled, "Why, are you welcome?" "That's not, it's just that you are not sitting in the town of the Eagle City, I'm always a little worried." Penny took a few steps, and gently helped him on add a cup of tea, saying, "Don't worry, there are still 30,000 troops guarding in the city, moreover, Walla is not there." Earl nodded, "Well, how is Vala's injury?" "I have seen it in person, there is no big deal, just for a while." When the two were talking, I saw the venture of Lawrence walk in. "Father, I heard that my mother is coming." Uman glared at his son and scolded, "Skill." Viscount of Lawrence smiled without care, "Rest assured, father, the guards outside the account have been opened by me, no one will hear it." Penny glanced at his son petting and laughed, "It won't be long before Lawrence can call my mother brightly." The Count Uman was helpless, but it was not good for his wife's intention. He nodded in a virtuous place, and then asked, "You come to the barracks to find me this time, what's the matter?" Penny glanced at the Count and said, "Can't you come to visit you if you are fine?" Speaking of the good tea, it was sent to Earl Moomin. Earl Moomin took the tea cup, but did not drink it immediately, but watched his lover and laughed, "Of course not, I just feel that if you have something to do with your personality, I am afraid that you will not run so far to find me so far." Penny glanced at the Count and saw that he looked as usual, and said, "It's really something, I just learned the specific content of the peace talk agreement signed by the Vegetable Angle and the Demon Empire." Having said that, she handed a letterhead to the Count. "According to this agreement, the Angra family will inevitably rise until it becomes the most powerful force in the northeast of the North. Therefore, my brother recommends you plan early and destroy the threat in advance in the bud." Earl Moomin took the stationery, frowned, and looked more and more frightened. How miserable is the giant devil lost! Actually signed such a conversation agreement? Before he completely digested the information, Penny spoke again, saying another more explosive news, "Oh right, there is one more thing, Duke of St. Hilda, died." "What, who died?" Earl Barman's eyes widened, and he looked at his lover unbelievable. At this moment, a silver light suddenly pierced the back of the Count Uman. Click. However, Count Uman seemed to have eyes behind him, and instantly grabbed the wrist of the attacker with a thunderbolt. The camp was quietly quiet. Only the stationery fell slowly, fell into the bonfire, and a flame was raised. Earl Moomin slowly turned his head, looking at the attacking attacker behind him. The expression on his face was extremely complicated, and his tone was full of pain. "Lawrence, are you going to kill me?" Obviously, the Vacus of Laron did not expect such a situation to pay attention to the behind, and he didn't know what expression should be on his face for a while. "Are you my son?" Earl Uman trembled. At the same time, he turned the teacup in his left hand, dripped to the ground by the tea in the cup, made harsh nourishment, and even rushed to smoke. Toxic in the water. Count Uman turned his head again and looked at Penny, but did not question her poison, but asked, "Is it my son?" Penny's lips trembled rapidly, but it was not the question of Earl Moomin, but quickly chanting the elven spell. "She is also a mage. You are looking for death." Earl Moomin roared, and he flew out of the Viscount of Lawrence. At the same time, a step approached Penny, reaching out and choking her throat, and interrupted the cast. The Viscount of Lawrence fell to spit out a bite of blood and struggled to get up. He was about to pull the sword and rushed again, but he heard a word squeezed out of Penny's throat. Walk. Mother, Aunt Lawrence tangled. Get, Earl Moomin stared back and roared. The Viscount of Lawrence looked at the horror of the other party's choice, and suddenly scared and ran out of the camp. Is he my son? Count Aman was still struggling with this question, as if he couldn't stop without asking. Penny patted the big hand of Earl Moomin. Steel generally choked his throat and signaled that he could not answer at all. Earl Moomin was so relieved and stared at his lover expressionlessly. Penny gasped a few times, and it took a while to calm down. Then, she didn't panic, looked at the Count Aman in a cold expression, and slowly spit out a word. No. Bite. The Earl's expression was instantly distorted, as if to swallow the woman in front of him. He is your cheap species with your brother, isn't it, isn't it? Penny did not answer, it was default. Earl Moomin reached out and choked Penny's throat again, as if he really wanted to strangle her alive. Penny's eyes stared at the Count Aman, without asking for mercy, but revealed a kind of provocation in his eyes. It seems to be talking. You strangle me, I try. After a while of confrontation, Earl finally opened his hands. The arrogance in Penny's eyes is even more. While rubbing his own red neck, he said in a bewildered tone. Talos Aman, you should be honored to be a partner of the Saint Sema family as long as you let me go, and when my brother becomes the Lord of the New North, you are the biggest hero. Earl looked at Penny expressionlessly. After a while, he asked in a hoarse tone, 30 years of couples, it turns out that you have no feelings for me at all. There was a touch of disdain in Penny's eyes. Okay, Earl, when did you become so sad? So what do you kill me this time? Could your brother make up the idea to accept Lawrence as a adopted son? Well, that's a reason. Are you not opposed? Penny observed the face of Count Aman, and seemed to want to see something from it. Don't you always feel that you have owed Vala, after Lawrence changed his surname, you also can you formally make Vala as the heir of the Count? Isn't this the beauty of both? Earl's mouth moved, and a ridiculous smile was pulled. Is there any other reason? Penny's eyes flashed and seemed to hesitate. But in the face of the sharp eyes of the Count Aman, and when he thought he should get the news soon, he said openly. Well, there is another reason. Didn't I tell you just now? Is the Duke of St. Hilda dead? Isn't it a lie that deliberately weaved in order to divert your attention? So, the Duke of St. Hilda really died. The eyes of Earman Aman seemed to slow down, and he could even see an indifferent joy from it. Yes, Penny raised his head deliberately. Therefore, the San Hilda family is over, and the St. Simon family will soon become the owner of the North. Choose. Earl Moomin's unmoved appearance asked, Duke St. Hilda died, why do you kill me? Penny glared at the other party dissatisfied, as if he felt that he had recontrolled the situation. Kill a paladin knight, you must pay the price. My brother paid eyes, and of course, your Aman family also needed something. The Earl's eyes trembled, and the condensate asked, what price did our Aman family pay? Falling the Eagle City. Falling Eagle City. Yes, Falling the Eagle City was sacrificed. Penny looked at Earl Aman, who suddenly became violent, and quickly persuaded, Talos, don't be excited first, although the Aman family lost a city, but as long as you inherit the Saint Sunnian family, we will definitely compensate you, and double compensation. Compensation. Earl Aman suddenly calmed down and seemed to move. Penny looked at the calm Earl Aman, and suddenly relieved, and quickly said, I will let my brother book you as a marquis, how about it? Seeing that the other party didn't speak, Penny's entire body was posted, and she reached out and painted the circle on the chest of Earl Aman. Her eyes were like silk. If you don't want Wala's low illegitimate child to inherit the title, I can still give a child, how about it? Earl looked at the penny in his arms expressionlessly, saying faintly, Vala is low, he, but he is the sister-in-law and my wife, and Lawrence, he was just you and his brother incest the illegitimate child below. Penny's face changed slightly, but still forced anger and said with a smile, what do you know, Lawrence's body flows is the purest saint-seen blood. The eyes of Earl Moomin are getting colder and colder. Do you think that there is a holy word in your surname? Can you take it for granted as a dog? Penny's smile suddenly solidified on her face, and her tone was touched. Talo Suman, don't you know? Click. Her words were only half said, and they were twisted around by Count Uman. Count Uman looked at the woman's body in her arms and mocked. It turned out to kill the descendants of a paladin family, and it is no different from killing a mortal. Alas! Throwing the body on the ground at hand, the Count Uman shouted loudly outside the account, come. After a while, a knight appeared in the account, respectfully. Earl, what are you instructed? Go back to Lawrence Uman back, life and death. Yes. This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 227. Chapter 225. The Duke of St. Hilda stopped in the hall of the church. Who would have thought that just yesterday, the Duke of the North also hosted the wedding of Colin and Vera, but now, she has always closed her eyes forever. The elusive fate is like the pollen of brown movement in the water, and the wisdom of mortal limited will never predict its next trajectory. Lingyu was open, and a group of nobles in the north took turns forward to express their mourning. Colin held Vera's hand and stood beside Lingyu, looking at the body of the Duke, wondering what he was thinking. The Duke's broken body has been stitched again, and the craftsmanship of the stone myths is quite good. Except for those cracks that are difficult to erase, they can't see any difference from the original. Anyone who tried to fight the broken vase will understand how difficult it is. The death of Duke of St. Hilda is also an accomplice in a sense. If it wasn't for the most critical moment he controlled the blood slave he controlled, I am afraid that the ban will not succeed at all. If you come again, Colin will still choose to close it to let the Duke of St. Hilda die. He would not forget the humiliation that the Duke of the North Border had brought to himself, as well as the harm to Ouija Marquis. Missing this opportunity, he really didn't know how to deal with the character who stood at the peak of the North. I am afraid that Khalil can only be at the mercy of the Duke of the Northern Borders as before on Villa's adult ceremony. Although the ruthless Duke of the Northern Border is currently standing on the Colin side, his existence will only bring the infinite pressure of Colin. One day in the North, Colin can only hold his tail to be a man. And I have to worry about whether they will be the opponent's sacrifice. Don't look at the son-in-law, but the Duke is the ruthless character that he even said that he sells himself. A son-in-law is a fart. This is also a disguise to Vera, and there are jaws in Garcia. As for whether it will cause the situation in the northern border to collapse, Colin has not worried too much. Chaos is a ladder. Although the words of Marquis Dawson were uneasy, they won the heart of Colin. For ambitious people like Colin's, a chaotic north may be more suitable for him. Therefore, the Duke is still dead. The only thing that made Collins feel that after the Duke killed a petrochemical, the blood didn't know where to go. Otherwise, he can take the opportunity to taste the blood of the paladin, how sweet it is. After the nobles ended the condolences, Bishop of Barras stepped forward to sprinkle the holy water into the spirit, and he read prayer in his mouth. Finally, under the guidance of the bishop, the crowd mourned together for the Duke of St. Hilda together. The spirit of the spirit was over, but the Duke of St. Hilda could not be buried. After all, it is the master of the former northern border. The body of the Duke of St. Hilda cannot find a tomb in Bengian City, just like Charles without a title. Instead, it must be transported back to the Winter City and held a grand funeral. At that time, the imperial royal family would send someone to participate. At the same time, it will also determine the candidates of the new Duke of the North. Colin, I stay at the night, you go back. After the crowd left one after another, Vera turned his head softly to Colin. Her face was a little pale, and her eyes had an indescribable sadness in her eyes, but more, she was anxious and confused. Colin held the cold hand of the opponent, and warmly said, I'll stay with you at night. OK. Wyra pouted and smiled, grabbed Colin's arm, leaned his head on his shoulder, and breathed a sigh of relief. As Bishop Barris closed the hall, only Colin and Villa were left in the entire hall. The cold moonlight is irradiated on the marble floor through glazed, and combines the glory of the magic crystal chandelier to form strange patterns. I don't know where to get in from the breeze, and brought the quietness of the spring night into the temple. Colin, Vera suddenly spoke, his voice seemed to come from the distant starry sky, deep and ethereal. What's wrong? Colin turned his head and kissed Vera's hair. You said, should I hate him? What do you think? Colin did not give the answer because he understood that at this time, Vera needed not an answer, but a talk. No matter how bad the behavior of the Duke St. Hilda has been, but after all, he has a 20-year-old raising grace to Vera. This is impossible to refute. What's more, he gave Vera the most neat identity. Khalil does not know who the Marquis of Garcia is with Vera, who has been born with a private woman, but if there is no Duke's adoption, she will only be a disdainful illegitimate daughter. I don't know, Vera said quietly. However, Colin did not hear a hint of hatred from it. If you don't know, just leave this question in your heart for the time being. Maybe one day, when you look back at a period of experience, you have the answer. Colin decisively sent a chicken soup to soothe the heart of the girl's injury. Verapin tastes Colin's words, and the eyebrows have stretched a lot. I understand, thank you, Colin. What a coax. Colin smiled and patted Vera's arm, motioning for her not to think much. The hall was once again silent, and Colin began to study the patterns of the Duke of St. Hilda in Lingxian, which seemed to hide any mysteries. But not long after, Vera asked again, Colin, what did you say that his father was killed? I guess, it should be a kind of spell, but I am afraid that the Paladin Knight is forbidden. Speaking of which, Colin suddenly remembered the scene in the Eagle City he saw through the eyes of blood slaves. The terrible scene of the fire burning the city made Colin feel bitter chill. I guess it is also a ban. Vera nodded. Moreover, it is very similar to a prohibited mantra I have seen before. Oh, Colin suddenly started, and he suddenly remembered that his wife beside him was also a mage. Maybe he knew some useful information. Then he asked, do you know this forbidden spell? Wyra nodded and shook his head again. I have seen similar ban on the teacher's Tibetan library. However, it is impossible for that forbidden spell to release, because the most important type of cast materials can long turn up. Oh, what is a ban? Eye of petrochemical. The eye of petrochemical. Colin looked at the Duke of St. Hilda in Lingyu, a little bit. Yes, however, this forbidden curse is not the same as the eye of petrochemical. I remember that the eye birth of petrochemical eyes is to use the eyes of the caster as the medium essence. However, on the day of my father's operation, there was no suspicious caster in the Red Castle. Moreover, I also looked up at the mysterious green eye in the air, but was not petrified. Therefore, although the two are similar, they are definitely not the same forbidden mantra. It is estimated that it is a new spell modified based on the Pepacapalabial ban. Colin touched his chin, and then he noticed an important message in the Willa narrative. You said you are in the teacher's Tibetan library, the cast scroll of the petrochemical eye. Yes. What is your teacher? It is Master Kusis, the deputy speaker of Master Jeveli Council. Kusuis, of course. Colin had never heard of the name, and he almost knew nothing about Jevel City of the Mage. Then do you know Mr. Colin said the name of the real caster. Well, I have seen it several times in Jevely. His origin is very mysterious. The relationship with the teacher looks pretty good. He often communicates with research experience together. Colin looked at Wyra, who was ignorant, and bluntly said, actually, Mr. Mo is the descendant of the Saint Sima family. Saint San, Vera was shocked. Yes, and I doubt that the Duke of St. Hilda is this Mr. Mo. Wyra frowned. Then, you think, Mr. Yan has developed a ban on killing his father according to the eye of petrochemicals collected by the teacher? Probably. Vera groaned for a moment, and immediately said, after I go back, I wrote to the teacher and consult him. Well, it is best to ask him again, what are the conditions for this forbidden spell, what price does it need to pay, and is there a solution? Colin was a little worried that one day he would become the target of this mantra. This forbidden curse is too scary. The paladin can be directly petrified. He feels that if he becomes a ghoul, the characteristics of the blood race may not be able to save him. Okay. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 228. Chapter 226 Daon. The dawn appeared over the city of Benjian earlier than in the past, covering this city that had just experienced great joy and great tragedy. Perhaps the sun also knows that today is a special day, and the two who want to sleep overnight will end the spirit. The golden sun was sprinkled on the church dome, dyed it with a layer of gorgeous halo. The side door of the church opened, and Colin went out with Vera. I didn't sleep all night. Colin was okay, and Villa couldn't open his eyes. In the sound of crisp horseshoe, the Reg Knight has personally set up a carriage in front of Colin. However, Colin did not get on the car immediately. Because he has seen another figure standing outside the church, Daon Bachelor. Obviously, the Bachelor of Dodon should not be in a hurry to pray for the Duke of St. Hilda so early, but is waiting for Colin. Go back to rest first. Colin sent Vera to a carriage, and then walked to Daon's Bachelor. Good morning, Master Viscount. Good morning, Bachelor of Daon. Colin stood all night, and then he was a little tired, so he turned and walked into the church, sitting down in the back row of the wooden chairs. The Bachelor of Dodon also followed, standing behind Colin. Colin did not invite the other party to sit down, leaning on the back of the chair, closed his eyes, and asked with a casual tone while rest. Bachelor Daon, are you so anxious to come to me? What's the matter? Master Viscount, I want to remind you that the Angle family is in danger. Colin heard that his eyes were not opened, and he was still a lazy gesture. Regarding the small means of Daobon's Bachelor, the previous life of Colin did not know how many times he had seen in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Those conspirators in the Three Kingdoms want to persuade them. When they come up, they must be able to scare the target first, and then wait for the target characters to panic. They can be dizzy with the 3-inch tongue. Essence. The phrase coming up with the fortune-telling Taoist priest, the master, I think you are dark, there will be a disaster recently, it is away. Why is the Angle family dangerous? The Bachelor of Dodon looked at the appearance of Colin, and knew that this was not a flickering lord. As soon as the Duke of St. Hilda died, the pillar of the most important pillar in the north collapsed. In the current situation, the Golden Lion Legion may be difficult to support it if you do not take action immediately. I am afraid that the St. Simon family will become the new in the north. The master. Colin still closed his eyes and said faintly, how do I think? What you want to say is that the St. Hilda family is in danger. Master Viscount, since you have married Miss Villa, the Angra family and the St. Hilda family are one. How can you allow you if the St. Simon family is in charge of the Northern Border Authority? Well, it makes sense. Colin finally nodded. What do you think I should take? Daon's Bachelor said without thinking, in the current situation, your best strategy is only one word: shall. Shall. Colin frowned. Yes, as soon as the Duke of St. Hilda died, the people in the north were chaotic just by the Golden Lion Legion alone, it was unable to stabilize the situation in the whole territory. Other plans. Therefore, the Golden Lion Corps must retreat. I'm not eligible to order the Golden Lion Legion to withdraw the Winter City. But Miss Villa has. Are you sure? Voila is not a marquis in the east, the heir who is in front of her, isn't there a Joyce? D'Anne's bachelor smiled and said, Master Viscount, you may not know that the Duke of St. Hilda did not register Joyce as the Marquis East. Colin finally opened his eyes and stared at D'Anne's bachelor, but Joyce's inheritance is indeed ranked in front of Villa. The smile on D'Anne's scholar's face remained unchanged, but after all, Joyce is just a 10-year-old child. Let him inherit the position of the Duke of the North, isn't it wrong? Colin's eyes turned around and continued to ask, so, are you supporting Vera as the Duke of the North? The Bachelor of Dodon put away a smile. Solemnly, he said solemnly, yes. Colin finally showed a sincere smile this time, patted the chair beside him, and said, sit. The Bachelor of Down was not polite, sitting down. At this time, the two finally had the foundation of cooperation. Colin's tone was softened a lot. You are sure that the Golden Lion Legion will obey Vera's order? You know, she is not the Duke of the North now. Master Viscount, as long as Miss Villa can appear in the camp of the Golden Lion Corps, I grasp to persuade the Nelson Cavaliers to withdraw the Winter City. The Nelson Knight in Down's Bachelor is the commander of the Golden Lion Legion. He is also a knight of the St. Hilda family. He only obeys the order of the Duke. Colin stared at the eyes of Daoben, and saw him in his chest, and temporarily believed his words. So after returning to the Winter City of Winter, the Winter City is really easy to defend and attack, but you can't always nest in the city. The territories of other blockbusters in the north are given to the St. Simon family. Of course not. The Bachelor of Dorne continued to analyze. Master Viscount, this time the St. Simon family plan to north, depended on three forces: Demon, Dwarf, and Amon family. The power of the giant devil has been cleaned out in advance, so you don't have to worry about them. As for the Amon family, you don't have to worry too much. Because of the cautious style of the Amon family. In the Amon family, it is a lack of courage. Last year's Northern Rebellion, I have seen this person, but it is just a wall that only cares about himself. In any side, he falls to which side? You don't have to worry about him. Life. The last dwarf power is actually divided into two: Dawson family and the Merry family. In fact, they are the most difficult to deal with, especially now the army of the Menham family has entered the north, and will soon meet with the Ditson family to form a pinch of the Golden Lion Legion. The main reason why the Golden Lions withdrew from the Winter City. However, the ultimate goal of the Dawson family and the Maird family is actually to establish a dwarf kingdom, not to help the San Sima family in the north. Therefore, if it is a last resort, we can also cut some of the northern territories and agree to the dwarf foundation. In this way, they will not continue to die with us for the interests of the Shengxian family. Master Viscoin, now you understand. The reason why I persuaded you to temporarily choose the trend is because there is a fatal defect in the St. Simon family. There is no direct army. Therefore, once the war is stalemate, the rebels they have attracted, the possibilities of the rebel forces are pushed by differentiation. As long as these forces have fallen apart, the chaos in the northern border is naturally over. Really? For so many years of exile in the St. Simon family, there is no territory, and naturally they cannot afford their own army. Therefore, Mr. can only rely on the coexistence to help all parties to help him deal with the St. Hilda family. But this weakness always exists. If the death of the Duke of St. Hilda can become the last straw that overwhelms the camel, everything is good. However, if the northern border does not have the ability to completely lose resistance, then when the situation is deadlocked, the biggest weakness of the Shenglin family will become a fatal loophole. Therefore, the most important thing in the north is to stabilize the situation. Listening to the analysis of Dodon's bachelor's pumping cocoon, Colin was calm on the surface, but his heart was secretly emotional. The talents of Bida College were a little durable. It is no wonder that he can become the most heavy think tank for the Duke of St. Hilda. Colin saw the Bachelor of St more pleasing at the moment, especially the other party also supported Vera as the Duke of the North, which had a common language with Colin. Colin also realizes that if you can conquer the Dodon's Bachelor, it will definitely help him to take over the inheritance left by the Duke of St. Hilda. So, Colin stood up and invited, Daen's Bachelor, are you hungry? Go back to the castle with me for breakfast. The Bachelor of Dodon also showed a bright smile, stood up and bowed to salute, and said, my pleasure. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 229. Chapter 227 Planning, Part 1. Red Castle, Restaurant. On the long table of Hong Tong Muo, Colin was sitting on the main position, and the Bachelor of Dodon sat on one side. Half-elves maid Katyani gave a rich breakfast. Lemon grilled chicken, bacon fried eggs, oatmeal, butter bread, of course, and Colin's exclusive deer blood wine. As for the Bachelor of Dao, he drank milk. After cooking all night, Colin moved his index finger at this moment, and it didn't take long for him to stuff all the food in front of him into his stomach. The posture of Daen scholarly eats very elegant. At first glance, he has undergone specialized training. However, his speed is not slow, and he almost solves the battle with Colin at the same time. After wiping his mouth, Colin asked Kathy to pour 2 cups of coffee, and then asked with a smile, Daen's Bachelor, I have always had a doubt, why are you willing to support Vera as the Duke of the North? The reason for being too young has obtained me. Indeed, the young master is a good opportunity for every power minister to show his skills. The Bachelor of Dowen sipped a coffee and considered, Master Viscount, in fact, I chose to support Miss Villa because of you. Colin stunned obviously. Yes, Dodon looked straight at Colin's gaze, and his face was calm. Because I think, only you have the ability to turn the tide and calm down the rebellion in the north. Colin is undoubtedly the leader in this relationship between Colin and Vera. Then, once Vera became the Duke of the North, the one who really controlled the northern border would actually be Colin. You just look like me like this. Colin was a little proud, after all, everyone liked to be praised. Of course you are a military wizard that can be seen by the Marquis of Garcia, and defeated the strong enemies twice in Union City and the giant Devil City, which proves your military ability. You are the first in the north. Moreover, your political talents are quite good. Whether it is winning the final victory in the complex game of Union City or stabilizing Binjian City in the northern realm, it proves your outstanding talents of governance. In addition, I have recently discovered the points system that you manage the slave, which can be said to be a genius initiative. Therefore, I believe that the North will be rejuvenated under your governance. Colin was a little surprised. Obviously, he did not expect that this Don Bachelor's research on himself was so deep, and at a glance, he saw that his chopping points system was the key to stimulating the motivation of slaves. However, he didn't want to perform too much, quickly took a sip of coffee, and then smiled withholding, and said, I did not expect that the Bachelor of Dao is so confident that you are so concerned about me. However, you may not support me like you, and not everyone wants to see Vera the Lord of the North. The Bachelor of Doran instantly understood the meaning of Colin, and immediately replied, Master Viscount, who wants Miss Willa to inherit the position of the Duke, is actually not difficult. Colin's eyes were bright, and he couldn't care about it. He quickly asked, what do you do? Daen's scholar smiled confidently, cleared his throat, and analyzed. Master Viscount, the ownership of the Duke of the North, mainly depends on the 3 parties. First, it is of course the San Hilda family. To be more accurate, it is the will of the previous generation of the Duke. Too much consideration. Khalil nodded. He actually wondered why the Duke of St. Hilda had not given the Church of the East to his third son Joyce before, and determined his inheritance right. But since this is good for Willa, Colin is reluctant to entangle the true thoughts of the Duke of St. Hild. The second power, the Bachelor of Dodon continued, the royal family of the glorious empire the Duke of the Northern Border needs to be sealed by the Emperor, therefore, Vera must be recognized by the Emperor Reinhardt. The third party is the Empire Senate. Don't look at the elder masters who are teasing birds and dogs all day in the venue, as if you don't care about anything. However, they also have a say in the ownership of the Duke of the North. If they oppose Vera unanimously, then even the Emperor Reinhardt cannot ignore their influence. Colin's expression was a little dignified, and he suddenly found that he had no understanding of the above-mentioned forces, let alone their decision. However, the discussion of the Daen Bachelor pointed out the direction for him, and there must be some ways. After thinking for a moment, Colin asked carefully, "So, how can we let the Emperor Reinhardt and the Senate agree to the position of the Duke of the North?" The Bachelor of Doran still looks like an urgent appearance. Let's talk about the Senate first. Empire Senate is composed of 117 aristocratic members. Although they do not have a title, they have a very high qualifications and have a wide range of people. They have a great influence on the upper levels of the empire. To be honest, I don't know what each of them is on Vera, which is difficult to figure out in a short time. However, it is difficult to make them like a person at the same time, but if you want them to hate someone at the same time, it is easy. Oh, what do you mean? Master Viscount, do you know Baron Heidegger? Of course you know, the Prime Minister of the Empire, Colin said lightly. In fact, he was a little guilty. After all, he knew this about Baron Heidegger. The Bachelor of Dodon does not know if it has seen the embarrassment of Colin, and when it continues to explain, it is very detailed. Baron Heidegger was born in a civilian family. He was fortunate to get the opportunity to study in Bida College after graduation. He has always served the St. Lorenzo family. Although the origin was low, Baron Heidegger was well funded. It took just 13 years to become a court prime minister from a civilian, and then sitting in this position is more than 40 years. A man of replacement. At the beginning of the throne, ascending the throne, he tried to seal the Jew of Heidegger in order to show the favor and win. But this decision was strongly opposed by the Senate. The reason is simple. Although Heidegger is expensive as the Prime Minister of the Empire, after all, it is a civilian origin. The Senate hopes that the Emperor Reinhardt will choose a noble daughter to marry Heidegger and promise to allow their offspring to accept the title. But at that time, the Prime Minister was nearly 70 years old. What's more, Heidegger did not marry his life. It is said that it is not good to women. Speaking of which, Down's face was a little strange, and Colin suddenly saw the Prime Minister's sexuality. In short, the Emperor and the Senate were stiff in the Heidegger's sealing in the end. After a fierce struggle and a series of concessions, the Senate reluctantly agreed. However, the Emperor also made a great compromise. The Prime Minister only got the position of the lowest level baron, and the title of this Jew was lifelong. Although there are all kinds of restrictions, after all, it is the first civilian to get the seal, which is a great glory for Heidegger. Unfortunately, the rejection of the Senate's show in the process, and the restrictions added on the throne of the baron, was angered the proud Heidegger. He even publicly declared, "I would rather be a free civilians, and do be a nobleman who was bound by hand and feet." Although under the persuasion of the emperor, Heidegger eventually accepted the title, but he had forged a grudge with the Senate. After that, the court prime minister used his position to pass several bills that restrict the power of the Senate, which also made the resentment between the two sides deeper and deeper. Therefore, if you want the Senate to support Miss Villa, then you don't need to figure out the attitude of hundreds of seniors of the Senate at all. You only need to let Baron Heidegger support the son of Joyce. All Baron Heidegger supports it, the elderly will definitely oppose it in unison. So, How can Baron Heidegger support Joyce? Khalil's heart gradually became hot. You just give it to me, the Bachelor of Dorn said, self-confidence. I have some friendship with Baron Heidegger, and I am sure to ask him to express the value to Joyce's son in public. Colin realized that both of them were from Bida College, and some connections were normal. Okay, then the last question is left, how to let the Emperor Reinhard agree to the position of the Duke of the Northern Border. This chapter is finished. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busrud. Chapter 230. Chapter 228, Planning, Part 2. Kathy walked into the restaurant lightly, continued the cup to the two of the conversation, and then left lightly. After the hall was closed again, the Bachelor of Dayan was amazing, Master Viscount. In fact, between Miss Willa and Skoy, the Emperor Reinhard will inevitably tend to Miss Vera. Oh, why? Colin moved and asked quickly. The Bachelor of Dorn drank coffee and said in a hurry. Master Viscount, can you know why the St. Lorenzo family can tolerate the St. Simon family to usurp the north? It even secretly instructed the Menham family to send troops to attack the Golden Lion Legion. It should be to split the north, Colin said in an uncertain tone. The Menham family and the Dawson family really want to build a dwarf kingdom. This move will split the northern border. Well, but you really think that because of this, the St. Lorenzo family ignores her in-law relationship with the St. Hilder family, help the St. Sin family who has the old hatred to win the north? The St. Simon family should also give other conditions. Yes, I also speculated like this before, but the Duke's death immediately made me realize what the condition was given by the St. Sima family. What? Colin was immediately provoked by the other party. The Bachelor of Doden did not answer immediately, but asked, Master Viscount, what do you think the Duke was killed? It should be some kind of forbidden spell. I think so too, and I guess that this forbidden mantra should be the masterpiece of the San Sima family, but I don't know what the price he paid for this. Hearing this, Colin couldn't help thinking of the falling Eagle City in the fire, and the green smoke. He wanted to tell Daoen about the fall of the Eagle City, but he stopped again. The matter of falling in the Eagle City has just passed. With the speed of communication in this world, it is impossible for Colin to know the news so quickly. In order not to disclose his biggest secret, Colin cannot let people know now that he knows the situation of falling in the Eagle City at least a few days. Master Venti, do you know Prince Rich? Of course, Doden's Bachelor couldn't guess what Colin thought, and asked again. Well, no, the only palace of the royal family is still alive. Yes, Prince Rich is a paladin, but he was born as a family of St. Lorenzo. He was not valued before promoting the Holy Realm, and even suffered a lot of grievances for fighting for cultivation resources. This has also led to this person to fly up after becoming a pavilion. Therefore, the Emperor Reinhard relied on this person and was afraid of it, and I felt that the latter would be more. But the strength of Prince Rich is doomed to be able to cure him, and Emperor Reinhard could only swallow in front of him. Therefore, when I saw the Duke of St. Hilda died under a certain unknown curse, I understood what the conditions for the St. Simon family to exchange for the support of the Emperor. Colin also understood at this time. You mean, the St. Simon family used this forbidden curse to kill the paladin, in exchange for the support of Reinhard? The Bachelor of Dayan nodded. Yes, Emperor Reinhard is afraid of the force of Prince Lake will be tempted. Colin nodded involuntarily and agreed with this guess. But then he puzzled, what does this have to do with Emperor Reinhard's support to become the Duke of the North? Dayan's Bachelor smiled slightly and continued to explain. I think the Emperor Reinhard didn't want to kill Prince Lake. The St. Lorenzo family needs such a banner, and a paladin is also needed to deter the quartet, but the Emperor must not want this sword to cut himself. The family's forbidden mantra. But in order to release this forbidden spell, Emperor Reinhardt needs the help of the mage. However, the resentment between the imperial nobles and the mage parliament is too deep, and Emperor Reinhardt did not dare to draw Jevaville on his face, so he needed a mage partner. Colin heard this and immediately reacted. Mr. is such a partner, but Vera can also become this partner. She is both descendants of the paladin family and a mage. It is even more suitable to be the target of the Emperor Reinhardt. Therefore, if you want to choose a Duke of the North in Joyce and Villa, then Villa must be the first candidate in the hearts of Emperor Reinhardt. Colin's heart was inspiring. He originally worried that Vera wanted to inherit the Duke of the Northern Border. He was inevitable. However, after an analysis of the Dodon scholar, he suddenly realized. It turned out that Vera had an absolute chance of winning compared with Joyce. Thinking of this, Khalil's look at Daen's bachelor's eyes became hotter. This is indeed a rare talent. It is talented, and there are people, and it is noble to the empire power. If you get the help of Daoben's bachelor, Colin will be as much as a tiger. Although he was recruiting, Colin was not anxious. The bachelor of Dodon is the family member of the Sanhilder family. As long as Vera successfully inherited the position of the Duke, he would naturally become a help of Colin. Of course, the premise of all this is based on the premise of defeating the Saint Simon family. If the Mr. Itchy became the Duke of the North, Walla and Joyce both did not fight, and play with mud. However, according to the previous analysis of the Bachelor of Dodon, as long as the Golden Lion Legion keeps the Winter City of the Winter City, it will cause the war situation to fall into a stalemate, and one by one to differentiate the vassal forces of the Saint Simon family, the chaos in the north will naturally calm down. Very good, the Bachelor of Deo. When I rectify the army, I will definitely escort Vera as soon as possible to the Golden Lion Court to Resident and persuade them to return to the Winter City. The Bachelor of Dodon heard the words, and happily laughed. Master Viscount, you made the most wise choice. However, the army of the Menham family has approached the Golden Lion Legion, and you must compete for time arrive in the camp. Okay, I will be active tomorrow morning. Yes. After that, the two chatted for a while, and Dorn's bachelor got up. There was only Colin in the restaurant. He drank the coffee that was already cold, and he didn't know what he was thinking. After a while, Kathy came in to clean up and asked, Master, what else do you need? Colin shook his head and instructed, No, I have been full, let Yaimen come to see me. Yes. It didn't take long for the housekeeper Yaimen to walk into the restaurant. Master, find me. Well, do I remember that Daen's bachelor is not a civilian? What is his surname? Master, the full name of the bachelor is Down White. White, Colin suddenly blinded again. Is this the northern family? Fortunately, Yaimen knew some of the family, and quickly explained, Master, the White family is the chairman of the royal family of the Empire Inheritance. The royal family, Colin flickered, surprised. A bachelor who was born in the royal family was regarded as a family member by the Duke of St. Hilda, which must have some reason. After a while, he said again, and instructed, You send someone to investigate the White family, I need more detailed information. Yes, Master. In addition, inform the Log Knight, convene 1,000 black cavalry, and get out of me tomorrow morning. Yes. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 231. Chapter 229. The sunset is empty, indicating another good weather. Da-da. In the sound of rushing horseshoe, ride to the north. The knight immediately was a little embarrassed. His scattered hair fluttered in the evening wind. The original luxurious costumes had been damaged several places, and the blood was all over the body. Obviously, he had just experienced a war. This person is the Viscount of Lawrence who escaped from the Uman family barracks. He held a bloody knightsword with blood stains in his hand, but at this time he had been regarded as a whip, and he kept hitting the war horse's ass, urging the horses to gallop. Behind the distance, there are faint smoke pillars rising. Dozens of vertical horses are tightly behind him, waving a knife bow, and chasing. This pursuit of escape has continued for a whole day, and Viscount of Lawrence feels that he is about to reach the limit. But he didn't dare to stop. Because from the previous short-handed handling, he can clearly feel that those chasing soldiers really want to kill him. I am afraid that the mother is so fierce. Even Count Umon should already know, he is not his biological son. The Viscounts of Lawrence rolled in a strong regret. He knew this for a long time, and he would not claim himself, and tried to assassinate the Count Umon with his mother. It should be waiting for my father to arrange. But immediately, he shook his head fiercely and threw this idea out of his mind. Can't wait for my father to arrange everything. Viscount of Lawrence knew that his real father, Mr. G, was more than one son. Although those are illegitimate children, he is not his father's sister-in-law himself. Even if his father became the new Duke of the North, he would never marry his sister's sister Penny. Incest is also a taboo in this world and is not recognized by the world. Therefore, if those illegitimate children still have a slim hoping to be able to turn right, then Lawrence is destined to not be a sister-in-law. Of course, Lawrence also knew the agreement of his father and mother, and he would become the adopted son of Mr. Sun in the future and changed his surname Saint San. But what if Mr. Yen himself has a sister-in-law in the future? Mr. 11 has never married his wife now, but after becoming the Duke of the North? Will he not marry for life? This sense of crisis prompted Lawrence and Penny to decide to assassinate the Count Umon, and then took the opportunity to control the army of the Umon family. In this way, with the army in his hands, there is a chip. Their mother and son also had some confidence. But I didn't expect. Inest. All kinds of complicated emotions are tumbling in Lawrence's heart. He has not noticed that the war horses under himself are almost about to be. The foam has emerged at the horse's mouth, and it is obviously possibly fell to the ground at any time. Between chasing and fleeing, in a blink of an eye, 6 or 7 miles passed. The war horses under the throne of the Viscounts of Lawrence had sweated like a slurry, and the blood was exuded in the foam on the mouth. Sure enough, the next second, the war horses rolled to the ground immediately. The Viscount of Lawrence was immediately thrown out, and his heart was shocked. Fortunately, as a third-order knight, the quality is far from ordinary people. In the air, he forced his body and became a ball. He rolled a few times when he landed, and then jumped healthily. Essence. The Viscount of Lawrence gasped a few times, watching the cavalry chasing behind him, and a desperate feeling was raised in his heart. But soon, he shook his head and pressed this emotion. There was a fierce color in his eyes. The voice of Lawrence held his sword with his hands and bent his knees slightly, and made a movement to prepare for the battle. Since it fails, it can only bear the consequences. The Viscount of Lawrence put aside all useless emotions and concentratedly staring at the approaching cavalry. Step. The sound of horseshoe is getting heavier, and the tremor of the earth is becoming more and more intense. Come, the Saint Sin family will never yield. Lawrence yelled, his expression was like a tiger in a desperate state. The face of the cavalry on the opposite side has been clearly visible. They raised the sword in their hands, and the cold light rushed like a steel forest, rushing towards Lawrence. It's closer. Lawrence took a deep breath and was ready to welcome the upcoming collision. Time seemed to be slow, and the air seemed to be burning. No, not like. The air is really hot. In just a short moment, Lawrence felt the heat waves on the face, just like facing a large stove. Boom. Just as he was puzzled, a fire wall stood abruptly in front of him, as if the air was suffocating. The chasing soldiers were terrified, controlled the war horses crazy, trying to stop in front of the fire wall. However, How could the war horses that have entered the assault state stopped in a short time? As if the moth fluttering the fire, most of the chasing troops rushed into the firewall successively under the action of inertia. The burning flames of the bear seemed to have a strange magic, and they instantly turned them into ashes. The chase who fell behind had no time to figure out what was going on, and they tried to turn around and ran back. However, before they escaped how far they escaped, it was a huge fireball fell from the sky, completely devouring the remaining chasers. The flowing flames instantly covered the grass of the square for hundreds of meters. When the fire faded, it could only see a large scorched soil and the wreckage of suspected ashes. The soft night breeze blows, and the ashes flying into the sky seem to be a little starlight, with a weird and cruel beauty. Lawrence looked at everything in front of him stupidly, and it seemed that he had not slowed down from a huge change. After a long while, he finally retracted the sword, with a smile on his face after his robbery. "Father, is it you?" Lawrence looked around and shouted loudly. Soon, he found a humble figure behind him not far behind him. "Father," Lawrence rushed over. "Why are they chasing you?" Mr. Yan's face was covered in the hood of the mage robe, and he couldn't see his expression clearly. Lawrence suddenly stuffed. After hesitating, he told Mr. Sun about what he did with his mother. After listening to Mr. 11, he didn't move for a while. The sun gradually fell down the mountain, leaving only a little afterglow to light up the world. The dark footsteps are no longer blocked, and the land is about to rule. The night wind is slightly cool, and Lawrence's heart is cooler. Mr. Yan's silence was eroding his belief little by little, allowing him to continue to slide to the abyss of despair. But as dark was about to devour Lawrence, a trace of light suddenly illuminated his world. "Just listening to Mr. Yan said, I know." His tone was extremely bland, as if he didn't care about the disaster caused by Lawrence. Lawrence's heart was embarrassed and asked tentatively, "Father, then, what should we do now?" Mr. Yan suddenly raised his head, and the white hood slipped backwards, revealing his face. "What kind of face is that?" The left half has become a strange cyan gray. The twisted blood vessels seem to be a piece of earthworms. It constantly moves under the skin, and even more terrible is his left eye. There is no eyeball there is only one empty hole, and one is not the bottom, as if you will be inhaled into the holes of the soul at a glance. Lawrence scared 3 steps in a row, but he immediately realized that his behavior was inappropriate, and he quickly took the top 3 steps. Forced to endure the fear and the trembling of the body, greeted, "Father, are you okay?" "Go with me." Mr. Yan's tone was cold. After saying this, he did not answer the question of Lawrence, but just stood up silently, and then walked forward. Lawrence did not dare to ask more, and quickly followed. The glory of the last ray of the sun also disappeared in the sky, and the endless darkness completely shrouded the earth. This chapter is finished.